good to get started. Hi, everyone. I'm Julia from Krannich Solar. Thanks for joining our webinar today with SolarEdge. Before we get started, I just want to give a quick presentation about Krannich. Krannich Solar is headquartered in Germany and was founded by Kurt Krannich. Since being founded, Krannich has expanded into 23 different countries with the capability to ship to over 100 countries. Krannich Solar has been a strong partner to PV installers since 1995 and offers everything that is required to begin and finish your solar installation. Our international purchasing power helped us build strong relationships with your favorite manufacturers, such as SolarEdge, to secure the best pricing and availability. With a growing market share, Krannich Solar is a privately owned and self-financed company that ranks among the leading solar wholesalers worldwide. Our experience in delivering solar products worldwide for the last 26 years has made us experts in our field. In 2005, Krannich expanded into the U.S. The U.S. has two main branches in California and New Jersey, and we just opened one in Florida and are expanding into Texas. And we have warehouses across the nation, including our newest warehouse in the Midwest and also Northern California. We are growing every day, so keep an eye out for where we will be next. Our U.S. team consists of over 60 employees that service the Americas and strive to offer the best services and options to our partners. Throughout the years, we have grown our product portfolio to provide over 5,000 products. We have partnered with leading manufacturers worldwide to offer the best material for a project of any size, whether it's an off-grid system, 4-panel shingled roof, or a megawatt flat roof. Working with Krannich Solar means you'll never work alone. With our streamlined ordering process, each customer at Krannich receives a dedicated sales rep to walk them through each step of the ordering process, from project design to on-set delivery. The solar industry is always innovating and changing. At Krannich, we do our best to make sure you know about the latest products and technologies available. We team up with industry leaders and seasoned professionals to train you firsthand on everything you need to know, and it'll always be for free. And this concludes my part of this webinar. Here's our contact information if you would like to reach out for a quote or if you have any questions regarding the products or services we offer. Thank you again for joining us, and now I'm going to be passing it on to Carolyn and Ben from SolarEdge.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, looks great.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you for joining us. Good morning. Appreciate all of your time. And we're going to talk to everyone today about SolarEdge's commercial industrial solutions. Here's a pretty packed agenda, as you can see, and it breaks out into a discussion about the company, which for commercial industrial is very important as it speaks to bankability. We're going to discuss some of our tools, then our technology, and finally our support. With me today is Ben Frank, our Senior Director of National C&I Sales for North America. Thanks for joining us, Ben. And my name is Carolyn Humphreys. I'm the C&I Sales Manager for the East. And getting into the numbers, you know, this one always makes me laugh when you say number one. I see everybody say they're the number one. So what do we mean? We mean by revenue. You can also see as you glance around this slide that we've been busy. We have nearly 30 gigawatts of product shipped worldwide now with almost 84 million power optimizers and 3.5 million inverters. We have almost 2.5 million monitored systems. So if you wonder why we have so much information, and remember, we're seeing all of that information down to the module level. So droves and droves of data, which we're doing great things with to figure out how to better serve you. We're now in 34 countries. Last I saw it was 32. And I think most importantly is all these patents. I mean, we are a technology company and lots of engineers. At the end of the day, 400 patents with almost 400 pending tells you that we continue to innovate and we continue to protect our IP. And we're nearing 4,000 employees globally. I'm going to hand this off to Ben, who's going to show you a very brief video.
Thank you, Carolyn. This is a video that is presented by ZV, our CEO, and he's going to talk about the SellaOne factory, which is a SolarEdge owned factory in northern Israel that we opened up pretty recently.
The events of this year have proven, not only for SolarEdge, but for us all, that this industry is mature and can service the market even in extremely challenging times. Smart energy, and solar in particular, have proven to be an excellent investment for home and business owners. And I believe that the demand for solar in a climate and world where backup and grid independence is growing in importance will continue to accelerate. We jointly have a lot to be proud of and a lot to look forward to. In fact, I believe, as early signs in Europe indicate, that investments in solar PV, including storage, all around the world will be one of the key drivers for economic recovery in 2021 and beyond. I'm speaking to you here from SellaOne, our brand new automated manufacturing facility in the northern part of Israel on the outskirts of Nazareth. Here, we are producing inverters and power optimizers with cutting-edge automated production lines, enabling us to ensure high-quality new products will be delivered to you faster and tariff-free. SellaOne is an example of our commitment to driving adoption of renewable energy globally.
Excellent. Thank you for showing that, Carolyn. So just real briefly, we'll talk about some of the R&D centers that that we have, as well as our other manufacturing facilities that we have around the world. As you can see, our main R&D center is in Israel, but we also have R&D centers in Bulgaria, in California, Korea, as well as Italy. And then we have manufacturing locations growing around the world. Specifically in North America, we recently opened a new manufacturing facility in Mexico, in Guadalajara, where we have started manufacturing some of our optimizers. So I'll switch over to discussing our commercial solutions. I do want to add, if anybody has any questions they want to ask, please put it in the chat box in GoToMeeting. And at the end of the presentation, Carol and I will answer as many questions as we can, and we'll try to leave enough time to answer a lot of questions. So let's start with the SolarEdge commercial solution. So what is the commercial solution? As you can see, we have in the middle of the slide, you see our inverters, and we have inverters that go from 10 kilowatts all the way up to 120. We have our 2-in-1 power optimizers that go behind the modules. And as you can see, we do show a picture here of a commercial rooftop site, but we also do a lot of ground mounts. So by a show of, I would normally say hands, but since we're not in the room together, but if anybody could put in the chat box, who does ground mounts as well, we'd be very interested in knowing that. So we do rooftops, ground mounts, carports. With the inverter solution, the optimizer, we have our monitoring platform that goes along with that. So you can see modules, module level data. And why do people use SolarEdge for their commercial applications? Well, there's really 4 or 5 key things that I'll go through very briefly. There's increased energy production. So because of the optimizer, we will produce more energy, right? That's the physics because of the PowerPoint tracking that we have at the module level. The other reason that people use SolarEdge for commercial applications is the flexible design, right? Because of the optimizer bucking and boosting the voltage at the module level, we could have much longer strings. Much longer strings means you're going to have fewer strings, but also means you have a lot of flexibility in string length. So we could overcome any objects or obstructions that are on the roof. We could handle multiple azimuths, tilts, shading, various levels of shading if you have obstructions like you see on the roof on this picture. We also have the enhanced safety. Safety is a huge part of what we do and really part of the DNA of the company. Long before NEC 2017 and 2020 came along here in the US, we had our safe DC technology, which basically means if the inverter shuts down for any reason, if somebody turns the power off or turns the inverter off, the optimizers default to 1 volt output and milliamps so that you have a very, very safe voltage and current on the roof at any time. The other key reason that people like using us is very simple to redesign, right? If something changes on the project, installers on the roof, and they need to move something, very easy to do that on the fly with SolarEdge. And I've already mentioned the module level monitoring and performance data. So how does that compare to a traditional inverter solution and some of the limitations that we see with traditional string inverters? Well, the first thing is reduced energy production. You saw on the other slide, I talked about the increased production because of our optimizer. Well, traditional inverters don't have that. So they tend to track to the lowest performing module in the string, like you see in the picture. That bottom module may have some shading, and that affects all of the modules in that particular string. So things like mismatch, shading, dirt, different angles and orientations really do impact the production that you would see with a traditional inverter. You also have less flexible design, right? You have a limited string length. I talked about longer strings with SolarEdge. We typically have 50% fewer strings because we have longer strings and the greater flexibility. With a traditional inverter, you have limited string lengths, and as such, it makes it a little bit more challenging when you have a redesign, and certainly redesign on the fly can be very, very complicated. And the other thing that's typical with a traditional system is you don't have module level monitoring or performance data. All the data that you would have is strictly at the inverter level. And then of course the safety and compliance issues. Yes, there is MLPE out there, but it doesn't have the same level of safety capability that SolarEdge has on our solution.
And I'm going to take over from here to talk about our SolarEdge Designer. And I'd like to ask another quick question that, if you will, to type into the chat. How many of you are using Designer? Because we'd love to get a sense of that. It just helps to know what depth to go into. So maybe somebody can tell me if you get a head count, what percentage of the group is already using Designer. What is Designer? So if you're not using it, you might not know that we have this innovative design and sales tool. And by that, I mean, it helps both people trying to design a system, but also people might want to be able to share this various information from Designer with customers. It's presented in a really customer-friendly way. What else does it do? It allows you to estimate and validate production. So, and like, what do I mean by that? Because there's a lot of tools estimating production, and we know that PVSys has become the industry standard for commercial industrial use, and our tool is within 1% accuracy of PVSys, and that has been verified by a third party, DNVGL, again, another industry standard. So we're really proud of that. When I asked the team how they did it, they said because it was a requirement from the very beginning that this designer would not be used, would not be launched if it weren't within 1% accuracy of PVSys. And that is more conservative than helioscope, just to be aware. If you're using helioscope and when you go into Designer, you get lower numbers, just understand it's because it needs to be closer to PVSys, which is this industry standard. How do we help your customers visualize? Well, if you look at the images on the right, sometimes customers, because it's on the roof, struggle to understand what will this look like. And so I think this can be a helpful tool there. And when you go in and you're using this, it will do automatic stringing for you and instant design validation. So if you're wondering, can I do something? If Designer says you can, you can, and we will stand behind our designs. It has an easy layout export for the monitoring platform, and this is super important. So when teams go out and they need to have the entire system in order to map, instead of recreating it, if you've created it into Designer, with a click of the button, it ports over to the monitoring platform, and now the installers have the entire design before them and makes their job of mapping so much easier. So this is a feature that people really, really enjoy on the installation side. So if you're not using it, give it a try, because this is a free tool. There's no license, there's no subscription fees. PVSys is very expensive licensing. And so this will allow many more people in the office an opportunity to see a lot of this and, and make it real, for people who really don't maybe interact with any of the other tools that might be much more expensive to provide those licenses to those folks who may not need to use it on a daily basis, but might really enjoy seeing some of this. Once you have that site mapped in the portal, we have a wonderful tool called Set App that allows installers on site to use their cell phones to do this mapping. And it used to be that one person at a time could do it, but now you can have everybody up there on their device. We would say, please make sure that everybody has their own username and login to keep the data clean and allow for updates without any kind of confusion. So, and be sure to download it when you're near a really good internet connection. So sometimes, people go out and they're now out in the field in a remote site. That wouldn't be the time to download it. So just make sure you've got it downloaded and play with it a bit and make sure that it's all up to date. And this will allow you to commission an inverter, to update inverter firmware, and to check performance. So a great tool. And we've talked a little bit generally, but obviously Ben discussed the various applications, but why are we winning on rooftops? So, the numbers are staggering, what percentage of commercial rooftops we now enjoy. And I think, we like to think it's safety because safety is so important to us, but production would probably be the reason for the larger scale solar folks who are using our products. That additional production, even when something like 3% might not sound like a lot to you, 3% is a staggering amount of money, because each additional percentage of production amounts to 1 to 3 cents of value, right? Now, 2 cents, we never get we do comparative analysis all the time, and 2 cents, nobody balks at. So 2 cents is probably conservative. So somewhere between 2 and 3 cents per additional percentage of production on a dead flat, no shade, in the middle of nowhere, no tree line growing up, no advantage to us whatsoever, not even a bifacial module, you're going to see at least 3% over time, which is going to add up to at least 6 cents of value. And it's really why sometimes people look at us and say, oh my goodness, they could give me their inverters and it wouldn't make sense. Well, that's actually a central inverter and a central inverter replacement. So that's why we're saying that the additional production I'm trying to give it just some context, because additional production is a little vague. And so we run hundreds of analyses, probably into the over 1,000 now. And the numbers are pretty consistent, and they're consistently showing enough additional production to more than justify, any additional upfront capex, which we'll get into in a minute. We don't even look at larger systems, because when we're doing this, we're looking at apples to apples. But if we weren't, what's nice is you can look at the roof to your right. With a traditional string inverter that Ben just described, you're going to have places on a roof that there's too much shade. What would happen is, if it affected a single module in their string, the entire string is brought down. That is the function of every string inverter, every central inverter. It's physics. And with us, you can put modules where you wouldn't want to do that if you had an alternative, older technology. And this allows for larger systems, and that's going to make everybody happier. As you know, even a huge roof or even a ground mount, there's still limitations to the amount of space you have, and therefore people are trying to optimize that space and get the added revenue from a larger system as well. we talked about code compliance, but what a lot of people aren't aware of is it's the lowest cost of code compliance. So even if you look at the price of a rapid shutdown box and a traditional inverter, that's what I was referencing when I said if even the initial upfront CapEx might look lower. Once you realize how much balance of savings there is with SolarEdge and additional production, we're actually a lower cost than a non-optimized code compliance solution. And that's the discovery that many people are pretty excited about once they go through this process of understanding where does that value come from. And we're going to get to that later in this presentation. We'll give you a sample project. To Ben's point about design flexibility, you know, those of us who've been in solar for a really long time, you know, we know so many stories where you get out and they've replaced the air conditioning equipment. You're like, oh no, that's a redesign, and that's going to be really painful with a traditional inverter because all those strings have to be the same length. So you can't just move modules around the way you can with SolarEdge. Our longer strings and being able to put the inverters anywhere. So for O&M, how nice if your inverters can be at ground level. Since we're not trying to meet code by having to put them in the array, thereby losing module space and potentially shading modules, we can actually locate it right where people would really like to service it. And it's not always possible, right? Sometimes you're going to have to put it somewhere else. But when you can, to be able to have them at ground level, to be able to service them is a luxury if you talk to folks who are on the O&M side. I coined the phrase of serious situational savings. I know that's kind of a strange way to describe it, but this was actually the way that many people were introduced to SolarEdge. People would say, oh, it's so great if there's shading or you're space constrained. Most of the folks that started out that way came to see all of the additional benefits, but that's where SolarEdge is clearly a no-brainer. If you have any kind of shading or space constraints or even bifacial modules, you will not see the benefit of using another product over SolarEdge because of all the added production that this will mean for us. The commercial solution, I'm really just showing you this form factor. Don't be overwhelmed by this slide. I know it's a lot going on here, but really I just wanted to show, and over time this will be phased out and everybody will be accustomed to the new form factor. And all of the new form factor, again, sounds a little scary, but it just means that we made some really significant improvements to our product that required a little bit more of a change. And you won't notice as much on the single box solution, which is on your left. What you will see is that we have more powerful inverters, which everybody's excited about, especially when you can do it with less weight and a higher AC-DC ratio. All of that is good. And we also made the surge protection device is now built in as opposed to optional and still field replaceable. But because it was optional, many people didn't have it. So now you always have it, and it's very exciting to have additional surge protection on type 2 on both AC and DC. Moving over to the right of the slide, do you see what you're accustomed if you've used SolarEdge in the past? Do you have a primary and either one or two secondaries? These are what I think of as the multiple box solution. That's the biggest change because people complained about the DC disconnect at the bottom being a little tight, so we made it bigger and we removed it. And by doing that, you now have what you see on the far right, and you have a Synergy manager with identical Synergy units. And I'm going to allow Ben to go into that in more detail, but I wanted you to see the difference because I think seeing it helps people understand instead of primaries and secondaries, which are now past, you're talking about a Synergy manager, and that's going to be the thing that has the size of the inverter. So up at the top, you'll see 50 kW, 80, 100, 110, 120. Those are the sizes of that Synergy manager. And then all Synergy units are identical, whether it's a 208 or a 480, they're all the same. That's going to make it so much easier for procurement and for O&M purposes. And then I'm going to let Ben talk about this in more detail.
Excellent. Thanks, Carolyn. Well, I have to say I'm giddy with excitement to once again show the new Synergy platform. This has been a long time coming. I know we presented this in a bunch of webinars last year, and the product is finally shipping, and with a lot of input from probably some of you out there that are listening in, along with a lot of other customers in the US as well as the rest of the world to come up with this product. So very happy to talk about it again. Actually, I'll start by asking another question. So how many of you, and please put your answer in the question section in the GoToWebinar chat. Well, not the chat, but the question section. So we'll have an idea of who's doing 208. So the question is, who of you are working on 208 sites? Now, 480 is very common in the commercial space, but we know there's a lot of 208 volt sites as well. And we're very excited to talk about the 50 kilowatt, which is the largest three-phase 208 volt inverter on the market. So excellent fit for 208 projects to actually make them financially viable. So please take a look at that inverter and let's dive into some of the really cool things that the new Synergy platform comes with now. And that's actually different than the previous Synergy platform. So the first thing is, and you'll hear these terms, we'll talk about a little bit more detail in the next slide, but the Synergy Manager. So if you look at the picture on the side here on the right, you see the Synergy Manager, that's actually the smart combiner box. We call it the Synergy Manager versus what we used to call the primary inverter, right? The primary inverter, which is the old one that Carolyn showed, that had the inverter on top and a pretty small combiner box on the bottom. Now we separated it, we made it much bigger, probably about 3 times the size of what the old one was. And it's actually made of aluminum, so it's much more robust. It's bigger, so installers will love working on it because it'll be a lot easier to get their hands in there to wire everything up. But it's still very lightweight and it's modular. The other thing is, out of the box now, all of our inverters, our commercial inverters, will operate up to 150% DC-AC ratio. So that process that we used to go through where people would ask for, hey, can we go above 1.3? You know, the waiver process, you no longer need to do that. Out of the box, 150%. Enhanced safety, you've heard us mention, you know, a bunch of times safety on this in this webinar. We've done even more on the Synergy platform to enhance safety. So things like built-in temperature sensors actually on the DC and AC terminal blocks. So besides having arc fault and ground fault and rapid shutdown capability built into the inverters and the optimizers, we've put in temperature sensors at the DC and AC terminals in the Synergy Manager. PID, so we added to the inverter. By the way, I missed that the inverter, we call it the Synergy unit. And all of the inverters that I mentioned along the top there, and I'll go into that a little bit more detail on the next slide, they all use the same Synergy unit. So if you're looking at spares, or even for our distribution friends like Krannich, you know, they only have to take inventory of one Synergy unit because it works on all of the Synergy platform. Doesn't matter whether it's a 50 kilowatt, the 80, 100, 110, or 120, they all use the same Synergy unit. So that Synergy unit now has built into it PID, or potential induced degradation, nighttime rectifier. So what that means is if you have concerns of modules building up PID during the day, which is quite common on commercial applications, the PID rectifier reverses polarity at night, so it reverses that negative impact on the modules. So that's included, no extra cost for that. Along the lines of safety and robustness, we've also added type 2 AC and DC surge protection built into the Synergy Manager, and it's field replaceable. So if a site does get hit with lightning strikes, then you can replace those surge protection devices, those SPDs. Pre-commissioning. So this is a really, really cool feature that certainly people that are doing ground mounts or large rooftops where, and this is very common. We see this happening very often where, you know, you guys will build projects, but you can't actually turn it on yet because you don't have AC. You know, the utility hasn't finished the AC work, so you're kind of stuck, can't do commissioning until you get AC installed. But we have this pre-commissioning capability. You buy a little battery pack, you can get it on Amazon. We'll have it as well. You plug that little battery pack, it's similar to a battery pack that you use to charge your cell phone. you plug it into the Synergy Manager, and now you could go through the whole setup process that Carolyn described a couple of minutes ago. So that way, even before having AC, everything's connected, everything's paired, everything's working, so that when AC finally comes, boom, you turn it on, everything's good. The other thing we want to talk about is 3-wire connection support. Our previous Synergy inverter, you had to have 4 wires, right? The 3 phases, neutral and ground. In this case, you don't need to have a neutral, right? So it will still work even for sites which we can't control and you can't control. Some buildings don't have the ground. Don't have the neutral. So in this case, don't need it. It'll still work. We also have an option for single input combining. So if you want to do remote combining, particularly on ground mounts, you could have that option as well for the inverter. And lastly, and probably one of the most exciting things for many of our customers, we can now accept aluminum cabling. So aluminum wiring on the AC side. You want to use aluminum wiring to save cost on whether it's your rooftop or your ground mount project, you can do that. Next slide.
Sorry, Ben. There we go.
Oh, thank you. So this is it. This is the close-up of the Synergy unit. I already covered a lot of the detail in it, but you could see this particular inverter. It could be a 50 kilowatt, it could be a 100, it could be a 110 or a 120, but you have the 3 Synergy units on top, and then you have the Synergy Manager on the bottom. So the Synergy Manager is where all of your connections are. And you see towards the right of the slide, your DC wiring, so your plus and your minus. So that's coming off of your solar panels. Your communication wiring and cables go also into the Synergy Manager, and all of your AC wiring. So everything is in the Synergy Manager. You do not have to even open the Synergy units at all. Right, so they're sealed units. There's no reason to go into them. If there's an issue with it, you just unplug it. As you can see, it's all modular connections. Pull it out and put a replacement in. Don't go inside the box. If you do use a cell modem, that as well. If you have a SolarEdge cell modem, it would get installed into the Synergy Manager. All right, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the economics of using the new Synergy platform. In this particular case, we're doing what we call a project analysis process. And a project analysis process is something we've been doing now for about 6 or 7 years. And we're picking a customer site and we're diving into the details of how does it compare versus, let's say, a traditional inverter design. So we just picked one example. We've done this 1,000 times. And if you have a site that you want us to do a side-by-side comparison, please let us know. Reach out to Krannich. They will reach out to us, and we're happy to dive into your project as well. So here's an example. This particular site, 3.4 megawatt. It is a ground mount. It is bifacial. As Carolyn said, very common. We see a lot of bifacials. We see a lot of single axis trackers on ground mounts. We love that. Single axis tracker, bifacial, ground mounts, perfect application for SolarEdge. This particular site was in the Northwest, and the comparison was our 120 with a P950 versus our traditional 125 kilowatt. In this case, actually a 1500 volts competing inverter. So what we're showing here is we ran PV-Syst in year 1, and we ran PV-Syst in year 20. The reason we do both is over time, there's a feature in PV-Syst that's called module degradation dispersion, and we're using that here. We're enabling that feature because it gives the most realistic indication of what's going to happen with modules over time. Basically, in a nutshell, modules start with a certain amount of mismatch, and then, like people, they age at different rates. right? So the mismatch grows over time. That's something that PVSys has calculated and has put into the modeling tool. So here you could see, again, everything that we talked about. We produce more energy in year 1, about 2%, almost 6% more in year 20. So that's an average about 4% a year on a site that's essentially flat, no shading, and even versus a 1500 volt string inverter, we still had longer strings and therefore fewer strings. So if we switch from this slide to the next slide, where we talk about balance of system saving. So you saw we reduced the number of strings by probably about 25 or 30%. Well, that's going to translate into cable, DC cable savings on cable as well as labor. So these were the numbers for this specific site. So we saved almost 2 cents in DC balance the system because of fewer strings. Fewer strings ultimately mean less home run wiring back to the inverter, right? So that's where the savings is. Of course, if you take out that material, you also save labor as well as the material. So in this particular case, for this particular site, very, very common, we save about 2 cents a watt and balance the system. So the previous slide, you saw that on average, we're producing about 4% more energy. That has a certain value that changes from site to site, dependent on the PPA rate, if there's any SRECs or other incentives. Generally, we see about 2 cents a watt for every 1% increase in energy. So 4% would mean about 8 cents a watt, and then you throw in another almost 2 cents a watt in BOS, means for a very, very interesting and winning solution. As Carolyn said, you know, there are many cases where even if they got the competitor's inverter for free, it makes sense to use SolarEdge. So that's the project analysis, and I'll turn it back to Carolyn.
Thanks, Ben. I too am giddy about the 120, I can't lie. I mean, it's a form factor. And Ben, I want you to make sure you cover the 110 and why there's this 110 that many people don't even know about yet, and that's K-bar headroom, but I'm gonna let Ben talk about that. I'm gonna focus on Advantage now. And another question, if you wanna type into the chat, how many of you have used the Advantage program? We'd love to know. And if you haven't heard of the Advantage program yet, Advantage really was born of concern about all those, you've heard someone say it, all those optimizers, particularly on large scale ground mounts, which is where we've been winning recently. And to lay those concerns to rest is the first reason. The second reason, and just as importantly, is we would be working with companies and the O&M team would see a downed optimizer, and I will concede, I found it somewhat upsetting myself. You know, you have all this lovely blue and then you see this black rectangle, and they would run out and replace an optimizer. Well, an optimizer down is pennies a day, and that's not going to justify a truck roll, but it's hard to convince people to just leave them until the next time they're out there. So the Advantage program was designed to really address those two different things, and it protects the PV investment for every site over 100 kW. So if a site is 100 kW or larger, you would register it, right? You're going to go online, there's some paperwork, you just reach out to your SolarEdge salesperson. If you don't know who your SolarEdge salesperson is, please type that into the chat. We would be delighted to introduce you to them. Ben and I are on a commercial only team, but we have a huge team that works with all of you that do commercial and residential work. So this program was originally, you know, intended for the commercial only, but any site over 100 kW can now enroll. And it's about 2 years old. It was piloted at first, so we're including that period and used with these large scale customers. And it's gone swimmingly. So we're really excited to be able to offer this more generally now. And what it does is once you've registered your site, the monitoring portal at 6-month intervals will send a report and you're putting in the various information that Ben alluded to, which is, you know, we need to know what the rate is that you're paying. That's why this can't just be automated, why you have to register it. We don't know what the utility rate is, and we don't know what the incentives are for a given site, right? So you're going to put that information in when you put some other piece of information. And at the end of that 6 months, it's going to tell you, okay, no optimizers were down. That's good news. But if there was an optimizer or more than one optimizer, it will say exactly with the numbers you gave us, how much that lost production, what was the value of that? And then you'll submit a bill to us, and you'll roll a truck every 6 months. So when you roll your truck, you're going to change out that optimizer. So the optimizers are good for that 6 month period, and then there'll be a replacement optimizer, obviously. And the whole program is about 2 to 2.5 years, just depending on what time there's periods. So depending on when you enroll, but roughly 2 and 2.5 years. Why 2 to 2.5 years? Well, because optimizer failure is like a bathtub curve for the engineers or aspiring engineers among us. You know, the issues will appear early. And then, and we know it's in that 2.5 years because, of course, whatever happened in transit, maybe they weren't handled like a Fabergé egg, you know, maybe, maybe the connectors were left open, sitting in dirt, or just moisture got in, right? That's actually one of the biggest reasons probably. So please connect those, don't leave them open. And then, you know, whatever the reasons are, thermal cycling, right? So that's why it takes a little time sometimes. The thermal cycling will exacerbate whatever the issue is, and you have those failures. But after that, remember, we have a 25-year warranty on these optimizers. No human hands touch them. You saw in the video that they're potted, so now no moisture can infiltrate. That was an early problem. And we're probably on our 6th, 7th generation. So we've made these very, very robust optimizers that last a really long time. If you're not familiar with the cost breakdown, because we have an inverter solution, because we ripped an inverter in half and you've got an optimizer and inverter, about 70% of the cost is in the inverter. So to have a 25-year warranty on 70% of the system from a cost perspective is really quite extraordinary. And it's because these are very robust pieces of equipment. So you're covered now for that period of failure. Now the failure mode goes to next to nothing, hence the term bathtub starts up high, like the shape of a bathtub, then it goes very low, and then at the end of life, at some point, 25 plus years later, they will start to give you issues again. And that's why we could do this. So we're so excited that this has been working out so well, and people love that they not only get paid for lost time on the optimizers, but additional truck roll compensation as well. And that's according, the reason I don't have that listed is that's according to the size of the system. So the bigger the system, the more, because obviously it's a longer truck roll to go through a really big site. And so I'm guessing there might be some questions about this, but again, your sales manager is going to be able to share this program with you. And most people have a little bit of a, this is too good to be true, because all of this value is actually free to you. And the reason it's free to you is this costs us so little. And it saves everybody, you and us, a lot of calls and concern about something that really, at the end of the day, has a very, very low cost. And it's very gratifying to see how low that cost is when people receive that report every 6 months. We also have a comprehensive service suite. And what do we mean by this? You know, we do have a disruptive technology. As I mentioned, nobody else decided to rip an inverter in half. We still get asked every once in a while, can our inverters be used without an optimizer? The answer is no, because part of the inverter solution is in what we call an inverter. Too bad we couldn't come up with another name. Part of it is in the optimizer. And so they work together in beautiful harmony. And because this is new for many people, we understand that we need to help people through the process. Once people are very comfortable with the process, you know, then the training wheels come off and people are, you know, very capable of doing it all on their own. But in the meantime, we really want to make sure that we help you with the project design and pre-sale, with design optimization, right? Because other tools weren't made for this disruptive technology, so they're not always as good at optimizing, hence Designer, which we talked about earlier. We can do comparative PV simulations. We can talk again about the financial side of it, right? And then when you come down to project execution, you know, you really want to make sure, you know, hey, I think I've got this But again, that designer can give you just a lovely design validation that we will stand behind. We also, we have tons of stuff online. We're going to get to the certified installer training program in a minute, but say you still have questions, or say you still would just like some help. So hands-on training, we just find that very, very valuable. So you're going to want to let us know. It takes a couple weeks usually to get on the calendar, but let us know, and we'll come out for your first commissionings, and make sure that everybody's super comfortable. We have a great installation checklist. We have on-site support that I just mentioned, but remote operations and automatic commissioning reports, and all of these things. If you're not familiar with them, please reach out to your salesperson and we can help walk you through it. On the O&M side, I think O&M are the people who love us the most, and maybe sometimes the least. Now, the least, if they're not engaged with us, then that's when sometimes there's some frustration because they didn't get the help that they needed. But if they did and you engage early, I would say engage at the design review stage at least, and that way we know about the project and we can help you from the start. That's when things go well, and that's when the O&M folks just love SolarEdge because they have so much visibility, right? If you're going to manage fleet and you can see from the comfort and warmth of your or coolness in the summertime of your office versus hunting around like people describe it as an Easter egg hunt. I think that's giving it too much credit, but you want to have that visibility so you can see your fleet and you can pinpoint alerts, and for performance monitoring, you have all of this data, which might be a little overwhelming at first. I mean, a lot of people are just looking at also energy until there is an issue, and that's when they log into our portal and then can drill down, and you can get that module level analysis. You can see a blown bypass diode, and you can actually use that for warranty purposes, for module replacements. I read everybody's module warranty back in the day, and shipping it one way to China is probably not on your list of things you want to do. And people have told me that they've actually used our data and gotten modules replaced, which is pretty wonderful. Remote troubleshooting, I just can't stress how much O&M people love that, and automatic reporting. And what people will find is once they've had this level of visibility, it's very hard to go back and just not know. I mean, traditional equipment is wonderful. I have nothing bad to say about it. After 15 years in solar, I'm grateful to every last bit of it. But when something new comes along that can make your life easier, most of us will resist it first. But ultimately, once we adopt it, we wouldn't have changed it if it weren't necessary. Most of us avoid change, right? So that's the comprehensive service suite, and hopefully, if you're not familiar with these things, you'll ask questions of your sales manager. So I alluded to the training. This was hard won. This is very. Ben might be giddy about the 120, and I am too, but I'm most excited about our certified installer training. There were lots of great videos. I don't want to diminish what we had. It was wonderful, but I felt that it was really, really necessary to have a certification training so that you could make sure that you didn't have any gaps. And so this provides folks with that peace of mind that you really covered it, from beginning to end. Everything that you need to know was covered, and that's gonna help save you time in the field, and it's gonna create a much smoother installation process. And you get 4 NABCEP credits, which is not too shabby. And 3 hours, almost 4 hours might seem like a long time, but every single installer that's taken this that I've spoken with, even if they've installed a lot of SolarEdge, shockingly, those are the ones I thought might be a little annoyed by this, but they said, you know what, I have to say, I learned not one, but more than one new thing, and they were really glad they took the training. So we're really excited. If you haven't gone down this road yet, please again, reach out to your sales manager and make sure if you're having trouble, logging in or accessing this in any way, we're delighted to help. I think it's well worth it. We have a quote down here, but from Sunbest, thank you, Ben Baxter. But the feedback has been very consistent and all of it positive, which we weren't sure what it was going to be. So that was a great relief. And I'm going to hand it over to Ben.
Excellent. Thanks, Carolyn. I guess in the interest of time, I'll go through some of this, pretty quickly. So we've had some transition going on because of the new products coming in on the Synergy side, as well as the new standalone inverters. So what we're doing is we're transitioning from, and then the other thing is with modules just seeming to get bigger and wattage and current and physically, I mean, it's been crazy to watch. So a lot of the existing optimizers they're too small, right? So we're stopping to build them and we're moving to the new platform, which is the P1100 series. So we have a ground mount version, which is the P1100, and we have the rooftop version that meets the NEC code requirement, which is P1101. And those are the ones that you could start and you should start designing with immediately. And we'll have some more cool optimizers coming later on this year and into 2023. Inverters, kind of the same story. This is really the transition from the old platform to the new. These are all the inverters that we talked about already in this presentation. I do want to just jump real quickly to the 110 kilowatt inverter. I forgot to talk about it. Carolyn, thanks for the reminder. That one's a unique inverter size that fits right in between the 100 and the 120. Reason we came up with that is it's 110 kilowatt nameplate rating, but 120 kVA power. So if you have an application where your utility is requesting power factor or kVAR control, that's where you would use the 110. So it gives you the ability to still get 110 kilowatts of output, but have approximately 5 to 10%, I think it's just under 10% of kVAR headroom, so that you could meet whatever requirement the utility may have for power factor control or kVAR control on that particular feeder. So we've had a couple of large customers that requested that. We've released that to the market, and feel free to use it as needed. Okay, next slide. So I won't spend a lot of time talking about the last few slides here, just because we're coming up against the hour. We have a ton of resources available on our website. These days, nobody uses printed media and flyers and brochures. So we keep all of that stuff up to date, the new inverters and optimizers, everything that we talked about. You can access it on our website. There is a commercial landing page. So if you need a catalog for your EPCs, if you need an investor catalog that dives into the detail for an investor or an asset owner, we have a commercial fact sheet if you want to show that to your customers. A lot of great material. Please go to the website and dig around. You'll see some great stuff in there. The next slide talks about some case studies. These, it's been quite hard to do case studies because of COVID, but this is just a sample from a couple of years back or from a year and a half ago or so. We have just an incredible amount of new projects, huge projects. I think our largest rooftop project now, which is in the US, which is almost complete, it's actually 15 megawatts. We have many sites that are 8, 9, 10 megawatts and above for rooftop. We have many ground mounts that are either in process or have been built. In fact, we have a 45 megawatt ground mount with a 120 kilowatt inverter that is starting construction next month. So a lot of great stuff. Again, you could get to our case studies and other customer feedback and referrals on our website under the commercial landing page. So benefits summary, just in a nutshell, these are the 4 key items that we always talk about when you look or think about SolarEdge for your application. Maximizing system performance. We've talked about that at length. The O&M, pre-commissioning, construction side, of course, safety. Whenever you think of SolarEdge, think of safety. That's our claim to fame. And then, of course, with the new platform, very easy to install and design with. And if we just look at the key takeaways for SolarEdge, really it's about maximizing energy yield. That's why people use us on all applications, including these 45 megawatt ground mounts. In fact, we have a 77 megawatt ground mount that was in construction and the rest of the world. So why do people do it? We produce more energy. It's all about the revenue. We talked about design flexibility. We talked about balance of system cost savings, safety, and then of course the long-term asset owner and O&M savings that you see because of our unique monitoring capability. So that's our presentation. Thank you everybody for listening in. I do have a few questions that came in that I'll talk about briefly here, and I know we're coming up against the hour, but there was a question from somebody on the webinar here about external DC combiner boxes with our new series of Synergy managers. So we do have a specific model where we have, single input is actually, we call it combined input. So it's 3 inputs in the Synergy manager. And we have worked with Midnight Solar to create a very simple, low-cost external combiner box that will work very nicely with our Synergy manager. So you can use any third-party external combiner box, will work fine. And I know the Krannich team carries that, and I'm sure the Krannich team could also get their hands on this special combiner box that would be the lowest cost solution. So, please reach out to Krannich. Please reach out to our application engineers. They could take a look at the site that you have and, give suggestions on the most cost-effective way to do it, whether you want to have centralized or distributed architecture, or if you have the inverters remotely connected. We could help look at all those different options and give some guidance on what's the most cost-effective way to do that. Let's see if there's any other key question. I don't see anything else. So once again, thank you everybody for joining in on the webinar. Thank you to the Krannich team for hosting us. And unless there's any other questions, I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ben.